Well, welcome to the fourth in our five-part webinar series. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Graham Davies, Governor of District 9685. This webinar series is part of our online component of our district conference, our one-day district conference that was held at the concourse on the 23rd of February this year. Tonight's topic is today's research is tomorrow's treatment. And the topic is looking at one of the great Rotary projects known as Australian Rotary Health. Before I introduce our speaker, and especially if we have first-time viewers tonight, can I remind you that we have an opportunity for you to ask questions to Terry later in the program. Simply type in your question, we have less waiting for those, and we'll present those later on. Well, Australian Rotary Health is making a great contribution to our society. And tonight we'll hear quite a bit about the Rotary Health story and also where it's going to from here. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Terry Davies, who's the Corporate Manager of Australian Rotary Health. Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Graham. I appreciate being here and I appreciate the offer to talk about Australian Rotary Health. It's a great organisation and, you know, I really feel proud that it's come from the Rotary clubs and from Rotarians. And you'll find a little bit about the story as we proceed through the evening. But a lot of people ask me, first up, what is Australian Rotary Health? And I've got to think about it and say, well, look, legally, it's a great company, limited by guarantee. It's registered with the Australian Taxation Office as a health promotion charity. And I think that says it all. It is exempt from FBT and has GST concessions. But the best thing for my job, and I'm the corporate manager going out to the corporate and business world, it is a deductible gift recipient. But having said all that, my time in Rotary has only been a short time. I regard myself as a teenager in many ways, 18 years in Rotary, and I still can't get over the fabulous and amazing projects that Rotary delivers each year around the world and in Australia and locally. So I'm very proud to be a Rotarian for all those projects and organisations that you've had some here on webinar during the week. So I really appreciate that and appreciate the opportunity to talk about this particular one, Australian Rotary Health. And if you know the history of it, we've been around now for over 30 years and you know it came about such a simple way and such a way that Rotarians always tend to grow in and decide on a decision and go ahead to try and do something about it. And it was Ian Scott, the Rotary Club of Mornington, and you've probably heard this story many times, but you know, such a simple thing of coming home and hearing on the radio the tragedy of a cot death. And but that triggered something in Ian's mind about research. You know, we really need research to make those decisions for treatment for the future. Hence our title, you know, today's research is going to be tomorrow's treatment. And of course, when Ian Scott looked around, he could see that there wasn't that funding in Australia that you see in other areas. The research funding was fairly poor at the time. And so he decided to get together with his club and make a bit of a noise about it. Get out there and start talking about what you could do in Rotary to raise research dollars. And he picked cot death as the first of that research project, and they were able to raise enough money to be able to fund a Terry Dwyer down in Tasmania. And the rest was the results of Terry's research. A simple result he found through looking at the data, cot death data, he found that simply placing the baby on its back or side is much better than placing it on its stomach. And so that information got out into the world of mothers, and the result was phenomenal. The incident just in Victoria in the cot death decline was fantastic. So a simple thing coming out of a Rotary Club to produce a result because of money that was raised through Rotary for research. Well, that went on for some years, and I suppose when you think about it, in Rotary a lot of good projects tend to be taken over by somebody else, either the government or another organisation. We think of the Northcott Society, we think of other areas, even down at the local level of the police citizen or the police youth club. Those ideas that came out of Rotarians and then got established and then handed them over. And of course, by the year 2000, we had SIDS, we had Red Nose Day, we had all those activities raising money for COTDEF and other organisations looking after it. So it started to dawn on Rotarians and Australian Rotary Health and the directors, chairman and the CEO, Joy Gillette, that we needed to look at where we were putting our research dollars. Yes, all health areas were there. We were still looking at prostate cancer. We were funding, all health areas. But we decided to focus on mental health. And you think about it, when Ian Scott decided to put the money into COTDEF, it was an area that no money was being put for research. And the same with mental health. In the year 2000, there was very severe lack of funding for mental health, and the researchers were crying out, were saying that to us. So from 2000 on, Australian Rotary Health gathered its resources and then started to form a model of being able to, firstly, raise the funding for mental health research and also have a process to deliver quality research projects. In other words, a committee to be formed and so on. So you can see now from those results that we now have a number of mental health initiatives. We have the Young Australians mental health research grants up to $70,000 per annum. Now, just think about it. You're in the research area, you haven't published, therefore there's a lack of money. People want to give money to people who are successful. Australian Rotary Health looks at your proposal and assesses it, and if you're the person that is lucky enough to gain funding, then you're on the road for a research and for publishing. We also have in mental health area just excuse me for a minute, I'm getting black out here with those lights. We also have the mental health Ian Scott PhD scholarships. That's $29,000 per annum. We have a minimum of 10 at any time. So you can see the money is being well spent. We also have the Royce Abbey postdoctoral fellowship. That's $75,000 per annum. So these amounts, if you start clicking over, do add up. And you think about the money that does come in from fundraising through Rotary clubs, also through corporates, also through events, you can see the money is well spent. Having said that, one of the areas that we were involved in were the community forums. And we started to just let that go into the community. You saw Beyond Blue take up forums, and we started just to pull back a little bit. But what we're hearing now out there with Rotarians is that the mental health forums really did and were successful in bringing awareness, education, and bringing people together to do something about mental health. So this year, we've gone back into looking at the mental health, the community forums, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that later on. We still continue to fund all health areas. So if you are a Rotary Club out there and you have some funding and you'd like to look at something in the all health area, be it prostate cancer or something that affected your members or your Rotary Club, don't forget Australian Rotary Health is there, and to be able to form a partnership, we call it funding partners, for PhD scholarships. It's $29,000, the scholarship is paid per year, but it's broken up into $11,000 from the club and $11,000 from the university, and the balance from Australian Rotary Health. So there's something to think about at a club level if you want to get involved in mental health research. Now, we move on. Other great areas of Australian Rotary Health. Yes, we've been involved in mental health. Yes, we've been involved in community forums. But don't forget our Indigenous scholarships. They have been a great success. There are 80 out there at the moment. And the reason they've been a great success is because the network of Rotarians. You know, you can always provide funding, you can always provide scholarships, but when something happens and there's an issue or if there's something that needs to be adjusted, fine-tuned, you need a network. You need a mobilisation of people. You need a conversation happening. And Rotarians do that very well. You do it very well. And we've found that the Indigenous Scholarship Program has been a great success because of that. Please consider it if you have money or you have funding that you'd like to take into the scholarship area, because we can really have an effect in the remote and rural areas. Having said that, our rural medical scholarships are just as important, and we find that in those rural areas, if you're going to give someone a scholarship and they come to the capital city or they come to a main regional town, they need an incentive to go back to their original communities and to bring the benefit of their training and research back to that community. And that's where we help with our scholarship. It's sort of like an add-on of $5,000 extra there to help them have good accommodation and to make sure that they're looked after during their scholarship times. And we've got the Rural Nurses Scholarship. Again, a great program, something that's been developed through the needs within Australia, within the remote and rural areas. Well, having said all that, and that was a mouthful in terms of where we're spending the money that's been raised by Rotarians, districts, clubs, we want to sort of say, have we been successful? Has there been testimonials to say that what we're doing with those dollars are achieving what we set out to do? Well, we think that these testimonials I'm going to show you now do represent some of the success stories of Australian Rotary Health. Our first one is not far from here, down at Macquarie University. Professor Ron Rapay, been doing some brilliant work within teenagers, depression, anxiety, and he's making statements there that up to 20% of Australian children suffer from anxiety. He's at Macquarie Uni, he's within our district, and we have funded him quite extensively for those research projects. It's amazing what he has been able to achieve, and if I can sort of have a look here and just quote something from him. The main professional interest is to provide a blend of scientific rigorous but practical applied research. So in other words, not only is the research is there, but it's applied research. And he's coming out with some great statements about children and about not to to be positive, not to be arguing in front of the children. These things that are starting to surface through research, not just through myths, but actually new knowledge. So fantastic, even in our district, that Ron Rapay is our professor researching. And by the way, he's just been invited to be our research chairman of our research committees, which look at all those applications. So well done, Professor Ron Rapay, and it's good to have him on board. Our second testimonial, I suppose, or our success, has been Professor Tony Jung and Betty Kitchener. What an interesting pair. They've come up with a thing called first aid for mental health. Now, occupational health and safety has been around for years, and there's been books and manuals written about broken bones and what have you. But just think about mental health. They've come up with something that now is being released in 21 countries, funded by your money, by Australian Rotary Health. Amazing success that you could think you go to the workplace, and if you're dealing with someone with mental health issues, it could be your boss, it could be a worker, then to empower you to be able to do something about it. A brilliant first aid course, 2-day course, and it just, empowers you to deal with schizophrenia, with depression, anxiety, those things that come up and can come up on a daily basis. Well done, Betty Kitchener and Professor Tony Jung. Now this is the interesting one. Professor Felice Jacka, Ian Scott PhD scholar. 1 in 10 of the most important studies in 2010 was quoted by the American Psychiatric Association. Now I'd like to break from the PowerPoint here and just show you that she was on the front cover of that journal, the American Psychiatric Journal. And it's amazing about the relationship between diet and depression. to think that she's now done the research and proved conclusively that if you are in a poor diet, and some of that's related to junk food, then depression is an issue. So that research finding, as said, was one of the 10 most important in the year 2010. But what I'd like to read out to you is what she said about Australian Rotary Health. And I think this is a testimonial to you as Rotarians who support Australian Rotary Health. And it reads here that Australian Rotary Health has also been absolutely essential in that they have funded some of the most important and innovative mental health research in Australia. One of the reasons that Australia is one of the leaders in mental health research internationally is because of Australian Rotary Health. Isn't that amazing that that testimonial is there in the Journal of American Psychiatry of Felice Jacka? And of course our own Rotary International in America has taken note of that as well, to see that that was published in America. Fantastic work from Felice Jacka. But we've also been successful in all areas, in all health areas. Besides mental health, we have a gentleman here by Mato Carlino, and he is a funding partner, so from a Rotary Club, from the money that has been shared with the university and Australian Rotary Health, and his research in all health area in melanoma. Australia has the highest rate, as we know, and he's been recognised as a great research project. We also have James Charles, our Indigenous health scholar. He's a father, podiatrist, a lecturer, researcher. It's just been amazing the amount of work that he has done for Australian Rotary Health through the funding that we've given him. We also have David Cropley, and he's the Indigenous scholar who was a finalist for the Hester Nurse of the Year 2012. So you can see that not only are we putting money into research, but the research and the scholarships that we're putting money into are first class and quality. Well, it's a hard competitive space, funding and fundraising in Rotary. I know myself, I joined Rotary to do some service, probably vocational in the sense that I could offer those skills, but also to join in a group of fellow-minded people who wanted to go out there and do some good. So when it comes to all those Rotary projects, it's a hard decision to make where the dollars are going. So you have to think about it. We fundraise by doing some fun events. We have Hat Day, and that's the correlation between what's under your hat, make sure it's healthy, make sure it's fun, and that comes about in October, which is Mental Health Month, and also Mental Health Day, the Friday. This year it's the 10th of October. We just ask companies to get in with the fun, to acknowledge that mental health is good mental health is going to make good things happen in your company. So get out there and have a morning tea or have a lunch, or just wear a funny hat, or wear your hat that you like, or wear a corporate hat. So we asked everyone in Rotary to do that. We asked all Rotary clubs to get together, have a fun night, and they do actually. It's amazing the amount of photographs that come back with those funny hats and with Rotarians showing that they support mental health and also Australian Rotary Health. We also have other events during the year that come up to try and make sure that people are having fun and they get to know us. A good conversation taking place at the golf course, at the race day, bicycle rides. They are phenomenal. I have to take my hat off to the Rotary clubs that are running the bike rides. The latest to come into the stable for Australian Rotary Health is the Five Peaks bike ride in Canberra, coming up on the 13th of April. They ride all the peaks, Mount Annesley, Black Mountain and so on. We have a beaut one up at Townsville called Banish the Black Dog. $68,000 were raised last year. I mean, these are great efforts by Rotarians who support mental health research and realise the value of the dollars from the results given by great research and great people who have put that research together. But we have to think of the future. We have to think, where are we going? So each year Australian Rotary Health funds a symposium in Canberra to get all the mental health professionals together and to tell us where they think the money should go, where they think Australian Rotary Health dollars from Rotary should be spent. And of course, in that symposium, they have all sorts of things come out, and I'd like to share a few with you. One is that an allocation of prevention of research projects. So 300,000 Australian Rotary Health allocation for prevention. That's very important. 50,000 allocated to those community awareness programs through Rotary clubs on prevention. Very important. From the symposium, they discuss issues of mental health, and they say that pregnancy and early childhood is the best time for mental health prevention. They made statements about smoking in pregnancy increases the risk of a child developing mental health problems. They go on with a number of issues that they've talked about. Promote positive messages to parents. There's too much negativity. Don't fight in front of the kids. Remember Professor Ron Rapay from Macquarie University down the road saying, you know, aggression creates aggression. From research, not just a myth, not just ad hoc, but from research, they're showing that don't fight in front of the kids. Aggression creates aggression. There's a strong association between poor diet and increase in mental health problems. Remember Felice Jacka. So these are coming out of the symposium by, you know, virtually non-Rotarians in many ways, mental health professionals who are telling us what they can see what the future is. Delay as long as possible allowing teens to drink alcohol. Don't introduce alcohol at home. I can remember, you know, as a kid saying, oh, it's better just to have a little sip of alcohol within the family circle. Make it created as a family thing at home. Well, they're saying the research is showing something different. Child abuse, research, alcohol smoking, as we've mentioned. Parents should reduce the amount of alcohol in the house. Risk factors of young people are diet. Again, we mentioned that. Personality type is a risk factor. Be happy. This is coming out of the symposium that Australian Rotary Health funds each year. Exercise and diet, of course. When you retire, this is a good one. Remember this, Rotarians. When you retire, take on voluntary work. There you go. There's your membership drive. When you retire, take on voluntary work. After retirement, join a club. They don't say Rotary Club, but make it interesting. Brain games are good. Increase brain activities. You know, you think some of those those games on your iPhone and that, there's something in it. If you want to move closer to your children, ask them first. That's a good one. And don't take a sea change or country change. It lasts until ill health sets in. So think about those things as you get to that age of retirement. I'm going to finish there. I really appreciate having the time to be here with the district, and I suppose I have to ask Les and Graham, are there any questions out there? If so, we might be able to have some time to answer them.
There's a couple of questions. The first one is from Michelle at Epping. What is the difference between the Ian Scott scholarships, funding partner scholarships, and research companion scholarships?
Wow, what a good question. Well, our Ian Scott PhD scholarships, we'll start with them. They're available for students researching mental health, whereas our funding partners and research companions PhD scholarships are for students researching all health areas. So one is for mental health and one is for all health areas. The research topic for funding partners and research companions scholarships are nominated by Rotary clubs and individual donors. So that's probably answers that in a very simple way. But you can look it up in our facts booklet. We have a great facts booklet around, so keep that in mind, and if you want that, just make sure you contact us at Parramatta and we'll deliver.
Marie from Penrith, how are your awards funded?
Oh boy, amazingly so and amazingly professional. Well, we have a number of awards, as you've seen, and I suppose if I go through them, I'll just mention 5, and they're funded in different ways. The mental health research grants are advertised in the Australian newspaper and the Australian Medical Journal each year. And I'm reading this from the facts book, so we can get it there. So Australian universities and other research institutions apply, and we have a panel of 12 experts. And I mentioned before Professor Ron Rapay, he'll be the chairman, and they look at all those research projects and accordingly put them in order of how good they are, And Joy Gillette, our great CEO, she comes in and says, we've got so much money from you, from Rotarians and Rotary clubs and districts and corporations and government, we've got so much funding, this is how many you can support. So that's one way. The other one is the postdoctoral fellowships, again advertised similarly in the Australian and the Australian Medical Journal, and also universities and institutions. And again, they're looking at funding for 75,000, and the research committee has the final selection with those. The Ian Scott scholarships, similarly advertised, so you can see we get out there amongst the universities, amongst the general public. And we also have funding PhD scholarships are advertised directly to universities and research institutions. So they don't go to the Australian magazine, but they go directly, or the newspapers, they go directly to the university and institution. And the last but not least, the research companion PhD scholarships are advertised directly again to the university and research institutions. So it's a complex situation, probably more to look at the facts book to read it to get the detail from it, but that probably answers it very quickly. Les?
Thank you, Terry. What are the applications assessed on? Dan from Parramatta wants to know.
Oh dear, Dan, that's a... Well, I can tell you that they have a great history of producing funding good applicants. I suppose we could say that, again, getting it from the facts book, that the research grants and postdoctoral fellowships are assessed on a number of qualities. The first one, of course, being the scientific excellence of the project. In other words, if it's excellent scientifically, then it's up there and put up into the top ranking. The innovation of the project. Remember, we said before that Australian Rotary Health funds those projects that are probably not being funded elsewhere. They are not being funded by the other companies or drug companies or institutes or so on. But so innovation is very important, something different, something new. Also, the track record of the applicants. They need to have a reasonably good sound in their application to show that they are there as a good researchers and got a good track record. The feasibility, including the relevant partnerships of what that research can provide, is also important. And last but not least, we mentioned before that we're in for applied research, the practical benefits to the mental health of the community. So that's a pretty good list of 5 things that committee would be looking at under the chairman of Professor Ron Rapay.
And the final question is from Steve of Heathcote. What is the success rate for your grants and scholarships?
Well, this is the area that I really want to put out there. We see it successful because we get some fantastic research. But when you look at the statistics and see that 121 applications were received for mental health research grant this year that went to that committee, they looked at them, and when Joy came in, the CEO, and said, this is the amount of money it's been raised through Rotary, through corporations, through districts, we could only fund 12. So you can imagine the disappointment there, 121 applications, and in 2014 we could fund 12. So please, if you've got some interest in research, then think about that. We had 44 applications, which was a lot higher than in other years for the postdoctoral fellowships, and awarded 2 fellowships, approximately 5% success rate. So again, money is the big object about the rewarding of those fellowships. So we think they've been great success and the excellence of the research applicants, but we just don't have enough funding to support them. And in the last, we had 53 applications for the funding partner scholarships and awarded 15 scholarships, approximately 28%. That's the amount of money we had. So the need is out there. There's a great need. Even in the Ian Scott PhD scholarships, we had 26 applicants and we were able to award 9. So you can see that the awarding of those scholarships depend on the amount of funding. So if you know someone, and I like to see how Rotary works, if you know someone who's interested in research, mental health research, please suggest that they contact Australian Rotary Health, and I'm sure their dollars will go a long way, and they'll be able to bring those figures up to more success than 5%, 28% and so on. Thanks, Les. Any more questions? That's it. Look, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity, Graham, and I'll hand it back to you. And this district, I mean, I just love the district conference streaming out there. I was sitting outside looking at it. It's a great work that you've done. Thanks, Graham.
Well, thank you, Terry. The one thing I could hear, Terry, tonight was a great cheer that went out across the district when you announced that the return of the community mental health forums, because they were hugely popular. And I think the value is that allowed Rotary clubs to get out in the community and really make a difference in people's lives. And it's done a great deal to destigmatise mental health. And there's so much work that we can do and are doing in that area. Terry, thank you for your passion and thank you for your presentation tonight. I think for me there were two things that came out very clearly. One is that the reach of Australian Rotary Health. Certainly it's focus on mental health issues, but it goes way beyond that. And indeed, within our district currently, as you're probably aware, Lynn is looking at establishing a PhD scholarship in hearing health. But the other part of it is just how professional Australian Rotary Health operation is, from the CEO through the corporate manager, through the grants committees. Every part of it is just exudes good governance. And what does that mean? That means that we can be very confident in the support that we give, the financial support to Australian Rotary Health. I have a very good governor, a very good friend, a past district governor, who puts it very simply. He said, as far as club contributions to Australian Rotary Health should be 1/3 to the foundation. At the end of the year, or whenever you're divvying up the distribution of funds, 1/3 to the foundation, 1/3 to Australian Rotary Health, and the other third to all the other programs you'd like to do. Now, you may not want to go down that particular ratio, but certainly it'd be great to think that everyone could contribute to Australian Rotary Health. So thank you, Terry, and on behalf of our producers, Bobby and Les, can I remind you that tomorrow we're back here at the same time with the final of our webinar presentations. Good evening.